Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is William Solari. I'm one of the student support coordinators for Frisco ISD. So welcome to our substance misuse prevention parenting program. So just a couple of logistic things. Each one of our panel members is going to speak for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then we'll do Q&A at the end. Some of you sent in questions, so we have some of those. But if a question comes up for you as the program is going on, there are some index cards and pens in the back. After their presentations, you can just raise your hand, and one of the members of the school district will bring you an index card. You can write down your question, then they'll bring it up, and we can address those. But let me go ahead and just introduce our panel, and I'll go from right to left. Mike Land is a resident of McKinney, Texas. He lost a son to fentanyl poisoning and now works to create awareness of the dangers of fentanyl so no other families need to suffer the losses due to fentanyl. Next to him is Lieutenant Sullivan from the Frisco Police Department. Dr. Hamouche is the owner and operator of Stonebriar Pharmacy here in Frisco. He's also the host of the Sports Pharmacy podcast, where he's done multiple episodes on the opioid crisis and mental health. He graduated from Virginia Commonwealth University with his doctorate in pharmacy with a specialty in drugs of dependence. Next is Dr. Irene Little, who is the CEO and clinical director of Access Counseling Group here in Frisco. Her practice has been helping families heal from the devastating effects of mental health and substance misuse since 2007. She's a licensed chemical dependency counselor, has a master's in marriage and family therapy, and a doctorate in counseling psychology. And closest to me is John Patton, who's a licensed clinical social worker and oversees day-to-day operations at Patton Sober Living. He has 2 bachelor's degrees from Austin College and a master's degree from University of Texas at Arlington. He specializes in working with teenagers and young adults, and the Patton Sober Living homes in Dallas, Texas focus on healing the mind, body, and spirit. So I think they all will bring a different expertise of a parenting issue, kind of, substance misuse prevention program. So hopefully you'll get a lot of great information. So we're going to start with Mr. Land, and he has a video which I'm going to play, and then he'll speak for a few minutes.
My name is Michael Anthony Land. I'm from Dallas, Texas. I'm here today because of my son Preston Land, who died on January 5th of 2021 from acute fentanyl poisoning. Preston was a funny guy. Just a great kid. I mean, he could make anybody laugh. And that's what keeps me going sometimes, is just thinking about all the good times and the laughs that we have. I still have his text messages to this day. Just a great relationship. And then high school hit for a teenager and things kind of changed a little bit. He struggled a little bit with a few things, some isolation, a little bit of depression, and tried to get him some help with that. He lived with me for a number of years, and then when I kind of started traveling a lot back and forth to Arizona, that's when I got that call, from my ex-wife saying, Preston's gone. And my first thing was, gone where? And she said, no, he's dead. Preston was not what society or what I looked at as an addict. An that's what upset me a lot was people, their first thought were, well, I didn't know he was an addict. An addict is somebody that can't live without it. Preston was not that way. That night that he took that pill, I don't know what he was struggling with. If it was just a quick, depression, he wanted, whatever it was, he wanted that quick thing that I just want to get out of this attitude right now. He got a bad pill. People think of drugs as the hardcore stuff that's illegal, the cocaine, the methamphetamine, the heroin on the streets and everything. If you go to a party, somebody says, hey, I've got this pill, don't worry about it. It's not anything hard drug or anything like that, but it's gonna kill you, or it's a really good chance of killing you if it's fentanyl. And so that's what's worrisome to me. First month or two after Preston passed away, of course, we didn't have an autopsy report. We didn't know. I think it was pending results of toxicology. When it came back as fentanyl, after I accepted that and worked through that, then I remember getting real mad. It's like, what am I going to do about this? I was very lucky to have my church and the group that I'm with there that helped me through a lot of the anger and wanting to find blame with everybody. And I said, okay, I've got to do something to stop this. And I can't stop it legally. I can't stop it with politicians. But what can I do? I'm a parent. I can maybe talk to other parents and just make them aware of, here's what happened to my son. Here's what I feel that I did wrong. Is it my fault? No, but you still wish you would have done something different. But there's a lot of stuff that, with my troubles in the past and drinking and stuff like that, he might have mimicked me thinking it's okay. So it's a day-by-day thing, but I'm just taking that. I still get angry sometimes, I still get sad, but I'm trying to turn this into something good and use his name for something good.
It's tough, buddy.
Mike Land is on a journey.
Doing this for you.
Visiting 25 national parks for his son Preston.
Yeah, I miss him so much.
A years-long drug awareness campaign.
I don't want to see another parent deal with this.
25 parks for the 25 years Preston lived before dying of acute fentanyl poisoning.
There's a saying, one party, one pill, one time. That's all it takes.
The man-made opioid is 50 times more potent than heroin. Collin County Sheriff Jim Skinner helped start a special criminal interdiction unit, 18 deputies over 8 counties, focused on human and drug trafficking.
Sometimes we'll encounter cartel soldiers, hardcore. Other times we'll encounter someone who's paid just to drive a vehicle from point A to point B.
Over the last week and a half, the interdiction unit has seized 48,000 fentanyl pills on 2 stops. In one case, hidden inside a battery. One stop right here off Republic Drive and 75 in Plano.
It's been known for a long time. US 75 is one of the long-established trafficking routes, but also all the major interstates.
The sheriff says DFW has become a hub for the drug, brought here over the border, then repackaged for national distribution. The interdiction unit has seized more than 167,000 fentanyl-laced pills since 2018. In that time, fentanyl-related deaths have shot up 886% in the county.
We know that for every load of fentanyl that we stop on the highway and that we seize, we know we're saving lives.
Yeah, here we are, Mesa Verde National Park.
Mike Land is in Colorado. He's done 7 parks so far. At each one, he does a bike ride, hikes to the highest peak for a memorial for his son.
I think he'd be proud. I've been trying to do this without getting teary-eyed, but it's tough.
Sheriff Skinner says the department will continue to work with federal and state partners. They can't do this alone. Mike Land wants parents to know they're not alone either. In Collin County, I'm Joe Pike.
Hey everybody, it's Mike. Well, it's final. I'm at the final 25th park for 25, Preston 7. It's kind of neat that today is 7:25 for the final memorial and the finished fentanyl awareness for 25 Preston 7. I'm here at Horseshoe Bend, the Glen Canyon National Park. Over the next year of doing this project for Preston, the success story for me, honestly, would be that a kid came home from a party and said, "Dad, Mom, you know what? Some people are passing around this pill, and I thought about what you told me, and that guy Preston or whatever. So I was scared. I didn't take it." That's a success story. So that's the legacy that I want him to bring, is that he will never be forgotten for that. I want his name to live on as that he helped somebody. You know, his passing helped another parent not have to go through what I went through. Okay, sorry about the volume on that last part with Sheriff Skinner. Maybe he's just a quiet man.
We're in
which
Big
is
Springs,
not true.
Texas. It's a low security prison.
That's not mine. If you notice those numbers where it showed 107,000 people, I want to put that into perspective. That video that you just watched, 2 people died in an overdose just watching that video in the time frame that that video was on. Sheriff Skinner also talked about where they, in 2 days, they confiscated 48,000 pills. That's enough to kill, where I'm in McKinney, the total school district twice over, just on that one stop. So I'm kind of a numbers person. I think, William, the last time I was here, I brought up that in Frisco, you guys had 5,200 students walk across the stage last year through all of your schools. That's about 2.5 weeks worth of deaths that happen in the United States, just to kind of put numbers on that. I also like to speak that if we lose 100,000 people, it affects a lot more than that. I know in my family, it can affect everybody up to 10 people. With me, if I'm having a bad day at work, that hurts somebody else, whatever, it just goes down. So 100,000 people can actually affect 100,000 people. One of the other things that when I was at the national parks, we had cameras and everything, and people would walk up to me and say, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Well, I'm doing a fentanyl awareness program." And they'd say, "Oh, thank God my kid's not a drug addict. I don't have to worry about that." And my first thought is, then you're the one I want to talk to. Because 70% of the people, that overdose number that Skinner put up, 887%, it's up to 1,400% in Collin County alone. And 70% of those are one-time users. And so you haven't built up a tolerance. Addicts, they're already aware that, hey, we're taking that chance. We know that this can happen. But when you're a one-time user, it can happen that quickly. And I went to a movie the other night called Fentanyl Unlimited. A friend of mine, her son Tucker died, and it's the new Tucker's Law. And one thing I saw in common with every person, except the portion they did with the addicts on the streets, is every parent, and almost every parent that I've talked to, they went upstairs or down the hall and found their child dead in their room alone. And it's just because they probably went home, had a bad day, decided to take something, didn't know what they were taking. And I hate to drill it into people's head. You have to be that helicopter parent. And I wish I would have done things different. I became my friend when he got a little older, Preston, right out of high school. We were buddies. And I wish I would have been a little bit more involved with that. Another 2 things that I want to bring up that's happening, a lot of people don't think it's going to happen in a nice county like Collin County and everything. Plano High School, they had an overdose at the school the other day, last Friday. The person did not die. They were able to get Narcan with them. My mom's hairdresser contacted me, and her niece was arrested at McKinney Boyd High School last week, and she had a vape pen. And at first, from what I understand, the rules are if you just get a vape pen, you're just sent to DAEP schools or alternative schools. They tested it, had fentanyl in it, a vape pen. So I'm just, bringing the awareness out there, and I hope that, I can do as much as I can. Like I said in the video, I can't close the border. I can't go out there and arrest people. I can't go into everybody's home looking for it. But one thing I can do is just spread the word to everybody else. And if I can spread it to one person, then you guys just keep spreading it. It is here. It's happening everywhere. The latest statistic I saw is that 1 in 4 Texans know of somebody or has been affected by fentanyl issue. So I'll leave it at that. I think my time's up. I don't want to take anybody else's time, but so thank you.
Hello, I'm Lieutenant Sullivan with the Frisco Police Department. I have been with our the agency here for 10 years. Prior to that, I was with College Station Police Department. Worked a lot with the kind of the college dynamic down there at Texas A&M. Since here, I've had the opportunity to work with our SRO division. Recently, I'm back on patrol now, but during my time here, I've had the opportunity to be a part of a lot of awareness within the school districts. I've worked arrests within the school districts. I've dealt with nurses who are using Narcan within our school district, and I've dealt with overdose deaths within our district as well. So the information campaign is major. I appreciate all of you being here, and then everyone that decides to watch from home. I encourage you. I guess one disappointment to me is I don't really see any students in the crowd. I really want this information out to the students. So parents, please put this back to your kids. Make sure that you share it with them. Take it back to really anyone that you know, because it doesn't just affect kids. Obviously, kids are a little close to what I've worked with, but I mean we see it on the streets. I mean it's really any age group. I mean on up to seniors all the way down to children who happen to come across it within the home environment. So we're just going to go over a few slides. I'm going to try not to bore you with a PowerPoint, but this will help reference some of the information I want to get out to you. So again, fentanyl is a synthetic opioid, and it is commonly pressed into what individuals would think was normal prescription drugs, and it is very, very similar. So they'll press it into these drugs. It's easier. One, it's cheaper to make. It's easier to get a hold of if they can just make it themselves, and then they sell it on the streets to users, and it's more addictive. So for a dealer, it's kind of a win-win for them, other than all the collateral deaths that it brings. It is in our community. As I mentioned, we've dealt with it within our school district. Local street names we see are Blues, Percocet, Perks, Yerks, Fetty. So they're buying them on social media apps. So the common ones are Telegram, Instagram, Snapchat. I'm sure there's one that I'm not aware of that they're doing. They're making purchases on. And where are they using? Really anywhere and everywhere. It kind of surprised me when I got into the schools to the extent at which we would see an individual use it. I mean, they'll go to the bathroom, they'll use it. They would go to the nurse's office bathroom and use it. But as we determine where they're using it, we put the information out to the nurses or whoever within the district. They start watching it, and then they shift to somewhere else. So it's really important to monitor trends and monitor where they're going to be using these substances. I did have a parent that was in the crowd last time I presented this, and she requested that I add the emojis here, because when you go through your kid's phone, or if you see the communication they're having, sometimes you may miss exactly what they're communicating with their friends. So some of let me see if I can find, I think so like dealer advertising, if you see that plug up there, plug is probably the most common way that they refer to their dealer. And then you've got all the cough syrup down there, cocaine, Xanax, Adderall, Percocet, and then again, most of that stuff is all going to be laced with fentanyl these days. So how is it abused? So you have it in the pill form, which most people are aware of. I mean, there's a very robust one pill can kill campaign, but a lot of the individuals we come across are actually crushing their pills up, and they're either snorting it or they are putting it on foil, and they stick a lighter underneath the foil and they burn it, and then they inhale the fumes with a straw. So I'll be honest, a year and a half ago, I came across a student that had foil with that burnt residue in it, and I had no idea what it was. I mean, it's a newer trend that they're doing, and they can get more than one use out of a pill, but it can still cause the overdose. And then again, just orally by the pill. So what are the effects on the body? So there's a lot. I mean, it's a depressant. So you got relaxation, euphoria, pain relief, sedation, drowsiness, dizziness, nausea, vomiting, constricted pupils, respiratory depression. And that's the major one, because the thing with fentanyl is it causes respiratory depression to the point that you stop breathing and you ultimately die. So, and touching on that, these are the overdose poisoning effects. So you'll see, there'll be cold and clammy, constricted pinpoint pupils, vomiting, making noises, and then again the respiratory depression. The deaths, I know this number was mentioned a minute ago, but we have over 107,000 overdose deaths and 73,000, a little over that, reported to involve synthetic opioids. And I can tell you from just an investigative stance, a lot of times I think those numbers are actually lower than they should be, because when we work these, a lot of times individuals who have an overdose, they have a multitude of substances on board. And as law enforcement, and when they go to the coroner's office, they can't say specifically that fentanyl was the substance that caused the death. So it doesn't always get ruled a fentanyl death because they had a kind of a cocktail of different substances on board. And then there's the background there. That's just a representation of the amount that could kill you with fentanyl. As little as 2 milligrams can be lethal. 6 out of 10 pills with fentanyl contain a potentially lethal dose. And again, I think it was mentioned earlier that different people build up different tolerances as well. So it's extremely dangerous for the first-time user. Commonly mixed with other drugs such as methamphetamines and heroines. The growing trends, we're seeing rainbow fentanyl. I mean, if something's not marketed to kids, I don't know what is when you start making it those candy-like colors. And then carfentanil is a tranquilizing agent for elephants. It's actually 100 more times potent than fentanyl. And then xylazine it's a powerful veterinarian sedative. The thing with xylazole is we can't bring them back out of it with Narcan, because it just doesn't respond to Narcan. So that's a extremely concerning trend that we're starting to see. And then scale of the problem, 2022, DEA seized over 57.7 million fentanyl-laced pills, 13,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. It's equivalent to 410 million lethal doses. And just for perspective, our population's around 331 million. So that could kill every American in the country. So a lot of times I get asked why would a dealer put this out there on the streets if they're just going to kill their customer base? That's kind of counterproductive to business. Well, it's still very profit driven. So they can buy a kilo of fentanyl powder. They can order it from China, from out of country, and they can press it into pills, and they can turn that a few $1,000s into tens of millions of dollars. So with that type of profit margin, that they just don't care about the collateral damage. They just don't. Narcan. So Narcan was approved by the FDA for over-the-counter. You can buy it at your local pharmacies. If I would encourage you to have this, in your car, in your purse, and at home, in your workplace, because you just never know when someone's going to go down, and it kind of reverses the effects of that respiratory depression, and it blocks the effects of opioids. So it doesn't have to just be fentanyl. Maybe Maybe you have an elderly parent that takes the wrong amount of a prescription med that's opioid based. It can bring them out of it, and it's effective. A lot of times we're seeing multiple uses, like up to 3 and 4 uses of Narcan to actually have the desired effect to get them out. It's effective for 30 to 90 minutes, and it is still extremely important to call 911, even if you're worried. At the end of the day, if you're worried about, maybe, this is my son, I don't want him to get in trouble with law enforcement. The problem with these opioids is Narcan can bring them out of it, but again, it's only effective for 30 to 90 minutes. So if the amount of fentanyl that they ingested will outlast that 30 to 90 minutes, they can slip back into it. So they still need that hospital attention, the professional attention from doctors at the hospital. And when we show up to a call and someone's overdosed, the number one priority is medical treatment. I mean, the criminal stuff, the idea of charges is so far in the background. We're just wanting to make sure that people get the medical help that they need to survive what's going on with them at the moment. And then our focus is primarily, where did you get it, who did you get it from, so that we can try and track down the source to address the source of the problem. And then, just so you know, all FISD nurses and Frisco officers have Narcan, and we have utilized it. It was successfully utilized a few times last school year. Thankfully, we haven't seen the need for it this year, which is, I think, I credit a lot of that to the information that was put out within the district to the students. I think students are starting to be a little bit more aware. The problem is you get, as mentioned, you get kids at a party and they get peer pressured into taking something. I will say, last time I was at a presentation, I heard, I want to say it was a substance abuse counselor, and he was encouraging parents to drug test their kids, no matter what. And I'm not going to recommend one way or the other on that, because those drug tests, a lot of them, I mean, they only test for a small panel of things. So if you're worried about a specific thing, maybe it'll address that. But at the very least, give your student, I guess, an opportunity to tell friends, hey, I can't take that. My mom or dad drug test me like once a week. I can't take it. And I thought that was an easy out. That's something, as my children get into their teenage years, provided that, that's a bit of advice that I'm going to give them, is just, hey, here's some ways you can get out of a peer pressure situation. Just blame it on mom or dad. And, and just being in the school, that's a plausible excuse for a kiddo to give to someone during one of those peer pressure situations. And that is it. So I hope I didn't spend too much time with a PowerPoint there. I've been told that I can get kind of monotone when I'm going through those things. So thank y'all.
Hi, good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Hussam Hamouche. I'm the owner and operator of Stonebriar Pharmacy, right off of Preston Road here in Frisco. I'm also the host of the Sports Pharmacy podcast, and one of the things that we like to push on the podcast is drug safety and the importance of getting help when you need help. So I've had a couple of mental health professionals come on, a couple law enforcement agents come on that just discussed what's going on in the opioid crisis, specifically in the DFW area. Quick table of contents, what we're going to talk about. You don't have to remember it. I'm going to talk about it. So a little bit about me. Like I said, I own the pharmacy. That was when my wife and I first moved into our house. You can't read our shirt. It says my favorite F word is Frisco. So we moved here 2012, fell in love with Frisco. I moved from rural North Carolina, in the middle of nowhere, to come here. So it's been great. I want to tell a quick story about why I went into pharmacy. Back in 2005, I was a first-year student at the University of North Carolina, and I had a lot of friends in the area. I lived there, and I saw them all the time. North Carolina there's not much to do, so we usually just like to hang out, and we go to Waffle House really late at night. That's what we like to do. I had a group of friends of mine. One was Adam. Adam was the exact opposite of me. I was the nerd in school. I studied, had like 3 friends. Adam was like the captain of the football team. He was friends with everyone, and everyone loved him, and I was really tight with his family. 2005, I was still trying to figure out what I was going to do with my life. I was 19, and I got a phone call from Adam's parents, and told me that he overdosed on Percocet. I was like, man, I've never even heard of this stuff. Like, never even knew there was a problem. He was addicted from a football injury that he had his freshman year of high school. So that's 4 years of drug use he's been just sustaining this whole time. And it was my understanding, which, I've been around him every day. I never even knew about it. And that truly, really broke my heart that I didn't know. And that's part of the reason I wanted to become a pharmacist. And like William mentioned, I wanted to focus on drugs of dependence. So I had rotations within the DEA since I was in Richmond, looking for meth houses. So I had experience around all sorts of illicit medications. And so I decided to focus on the opioid crisis. So that's everyone's talked about the numbers about the opioids and the fentanyl and illicit drugs that are going on. I put a cool chart on the side there just to see how much in the past couple years. A little bit about opioids is commonly used in our community, post-surgery, acute medication, even for chronic pain and pain management. Used safely, it's wonderful. It helps so many different people. And so when we talk about where the crisis comes from, and I personally, as a pharmacist, see it, it seems like it's a little bit overprescribed. For example, hydrocodone is the #1 prescribed medication in the entire country, and it's not close. Second is amoxicillin, and it's about 100 times less how much they prescribe hydrocodone. A lot of these high school students get addicted to it from a sports injury, and that's what kind of pushed it into the opioid crisis. We're here discussing fentanyl today, and back then fentanyl was super expensive, and it was only focused on in hospital patients and cancer patients in a patch. And when you get a patch, it's about 10 micrograms. So we're talking about 1,000-fold less than what we're seeing right now, right, the 1 milligram. And there was mention of xylazine. Xylazine is considered a horse tranquilizer, and it actually inhibits the metabolism of fentanyl, so it stays in your system even longer. Drug dealers like to use it because it makes their product that much better. So if they can keep the high better, they're going to get more customers. They're going to be able to spread the awareness that way. And when they're pressing these pills, when they're making the pills like Officer Sullivan, or Lieutenant Sullivan was mentioning, we at Stonebriar, we're a compounding pharmacy. We're accredited to be one. We went through rigorous exercises to make sure that we're doing things the right way. And even then, we have safety protocols whenever we're making just capsules, meaning that we have to measure weights, making sure that everything's even in each capsule. We send it for testing. I am not sure drug dealers are ever doing that because it's expensive. So every pill will have a different amount of fentanyl in it versus the rest of the batch, because they're obviously not going to mix it as well as we would. So that's a part of the issue as well, because drug dealers, they want to keep their people alive. They want to make more money. They want them to come back to them saying, oh, this guy's got the good stuff. Let me go back to this guy. We discussed opioid reversal agents, Narcan. We have it available at Stonebriar Pharmacy right over the counter. This is my pharmacy, my beautiful wife back there. She designed it, so she's proud of it. So for us as a pharmacist, what can we do? I do CEs on addiction, and especially on chronic pain management. Love doing things like this and meeting cool people, and William's nice enough to invite me to come here. We're always committed to patient well-being. And for us, with the Board of Pharmacy, we have a red flag checklist to check for any signs of overprescribing, patients getting the wrong medications from the wrong time, and pushing through pill mills. So it's something we stress at us. And like I said, we talk about drugs of dependence. So let's talk a little bit about risk factors. These are the most common ones that I found. I'm sorry, man, I forgot your name, sir. I'm so sorry. Sir, Mike. Mike talked a little bit about the genetics and the mental health conditions of where it could stem from. And that could lead into issues around them, especially with their environment, the prescription history, and if they've had any prior substance abuse. And I'm sure the people here are going to go into more detail with these. Some of the signs of opioid addiction, there's obviously physical signs. This is specifically more around actual opioids rather than just fentanyl. So some of the physical signs, like he's mentioned, either dilated or constricted pupils, slurred speech, drowsiness, or nodding off, and different changes in their sleep patterns. Behavioral signs, which I know we're going to discuss more, is increased secrecy, dishonesty, and neglect of responsibilities. Those are the things that you notice, and these are just specifically for drug addiction. And then, there's obviously psychological signs and drug-seeking behavior, withdrawal symptoms. I was going to go into detail on some of these. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. Open communication is by far the easiest thing that you could do. Just having that dialogue with your coworkers, your students, your kids is always the most important part. Making sure you have safe storage of medications. I'll tell you, for patients that aren't chronic pain management, it's really important that you know where your medication is, nobody else can get to it, and you're for every single tablet that's in there. And lead by example. That's the most important thing that I want to make sure that we do up here, that a lot of everyone is doing up here too. Different treatments. There's a whole list of them. For us, the medication-assisted treatment, there's different medications that patients can take now to help with opioid addiction. One of them is naltrexone. That's a huge one that's used a lot for patients. So it's making sure you're treating the underlying issue, be it depression, anxiety, different risk factors that are involved that we discussed earlier. Yeah, and community involvement. I know I'm doing another talk with Drug-Free McKinney pretty soon. Every pharmacy will have a drug take-back day. I know I think Frisco Police Department, y'all do a couple a year, right? That's an important way of just safe disposal of medication. Please don't throw it away. Please don't flush it down the toilet. Please don't put it down into the drain. That's all I'll tell you. And yeah, that's it. You can follow me on social media. I talk about these things a lot. Come by Stonebriar. I'm cool, I promise. And now these speakers, man, I'm so excited to hear more about what they have to say, man. So I really appreciate y'all being here. And Mike, thanks for having me, man.
Real quick before Dr. Little speaks, Medical City this Saturday is having a drug take-back event, Medical City Frisco. So October 28th, you can just go to their website. It's also on frisco.gov's website. So,
thanks. So I'm Irene Little. Sometimes I forget the doctor piece. I've been working with teens for a really, really long time, and I will tell you, it is my passion. I love it, and they're difficult. They're difficult as parents to raise them, right? And they're difficult because they're just uncomfortable. And so I love any kind of challenge that I can get my hands on. So anyway, I will tell you, I've been working with families since the day I started in this field. And I feel like that's really going to make or break our success, right? The families. One of the things that when William asked me to do this, we talked about what can I bring to the table, right? I mean, I can tell you all of the statistics, but they did a really good job of that. And I can tell you about the different counseling theories and the techniques and why I dress the way I do when I work with your teens and why I cuss and all that other stuff. But the reality is this. Where I feel like I can help you the most is to really, like you were saying, was we need to talk about this not being a punishment, right? Just because you're upset with somebody and you get to that point, you're like, oh, well, you have problems, you need to get help. Okay, well, if that's the way you're approaching trying to help somebody get help, you're already telling them they're bad and they're wrong. This isn't a punishment, right? It isn't a last resort. This is let's get in early. Let's work through this. One of the things that I deal with the most is the denial, right? I have family members, I have parents who come in and they're saying, well, my kid won't come. They won't come to treatment. They won't come to even the assessment. So I guess we have to cancel. I'm like, no, get in here. If your kid won't show up, you show up. You come meet with us and we will tell you how to restore that balance in your life and that balance in your home, right? Because a lot of times what I run into is I find that parents think they have to have proof. Well, I can't prove that they were using. I can't prove that it was pot, not oregano. I can't prove what was it. Doesn't matter. If the behavior is showing you that this is not okay, bring them in. We know that the behavior is not working. So let's start dealing with that. and let's start working through getting you guys back on track. If you don't have control in your home and your kid just comes and goes whenever they want, there's a problem. You don't have to have proof, and you don't have to have permission. Bring your kid. Bring your partner. People laugh. They think I'm crazy because, again, I like challenges. I bring in divorced couples. One of my favorite families to work with, I had one person who was divorced from two people, but they were involved in the family, and anyone who is parenting, we're a team. We need to utilize the community, right? I talk all the time about you are doing no favors by not having a consequence. Give a consequence, right? It's not just drinking if you didn't have permission, if, you didn't know about it. It's like, oh, well, it's a little pot. No, it's not acceptable. They're too young. Their brains are still developing. It's not acceptable. And I loved when you said, be an example, right? We talk about Just Say No and Red Ribbon Week, and we teach kids at an early age that drugs are bad, and we do teach that alcohol is a drug, and then they go home and they see mom and dad drinking, or they got the Super Bowl party and everybody's drunk. But we're not talking about it. We need to lead by example, and we need to have those open conversations. It's not one and done. We need to talk about it. That's how we're going to help get your kids to understand that there's a consequence. I love when the kids get caught at a party by the police and they're getting tickets and they're being sent to court. I understand there's a lot of parents that are like, oh, you're going to ruin their life, and they're going to have this on the record. No, they won't. Not if they start experiencing consequences now and we start working on the solution now. That is actually part of the solution, right? If they think they can get away with it, they will. And if they do, then we end up where it escalates, they isolate, you become isolated, and then we end up having to bury our kids, right? It's awful. It's not what we want. So the drug testing, I've been doing that forever. I used to have a drug testing lab. But we drug test, and you can get those. You can test for nicotine, you can test for fentanyl, you can test for really almost any drugs in your home, right? One of the things that we do in our treatment center is we want to teach our families how to drug test. It doesn't need to start as a punishment or gotcha. It is 100% a safety net. It helps kids refuse. The reason we see a lot of people on probation that are successful is because they know what the rules are. They know that person doesn't like them enough to let them get away with it. And they're going to be held accountable with a drug test. So start drug testing. I started drug testing both my kids in 6th grade. And the reason why, even though they're so young, I've been working with people who started that young. Sometimes they're the oldest kid in the home, but sometimes they're the youngest. So you have an 11 or 12-year-old who's hanging out with 15, 16-year-olds. We wouldn't do that in a normal world, but they're related. So they are exposed. And it is easier to say, I can't do that because I get drug tested. And you need to do it regularly, not just when you think that there's something wrong, not just once in a while. They spend the night out, drug test them when they come home. If you let them go to a party, drug test them. It's not to punish. It's to help them know that they have to be accountable because their friends are going to teach them. I went through my son's phone, and he's like, yeah, man, I can't do that. And these kids are like, oh, no, that's fine. You want to, there's ways to get around that drug testing. And he's like, no, thanks. I don't want to get caught doing that. They know how to get around it, but it's easier to say it's not worth the risk because I know the consequence. Speaking of that, too, kids are not entitled to privacy, and I feel like it's very important to know that. You're paying for the phone. You're paying for the room. It is up to you to do that. If I'm not mistaken, there's even consequences for parents if your kid has stuff in their possession or on their phones that they shouldn't have, right? So you are responsible. It falls on you. I remember many years ago, there was I was working with a group of teens, and one of them had gotten into a pretty gnarly fight, and it was really bad, and it resulted in severe consequences for the person he beat up. The family got sued, not him. So we do need to remember that it's not, you don't have to be their favorite person. You don't have to be their best friend. Our job is to teach them coping skills, to teach them good decision making, to teach them that life does have consequences, whether they're good or bad, and to help them survive, because gosh, adolescence is not easy. That's what I have for you guys tonight.
Okay, perfect. So yeah, guys, my name's John Patton. I'm, master's level clinician. I've done interventions since 2009, and then, as we mentioned earlier, have some sober living homes in Dallas. Which there's our teenage home that goes as young as 16, and then we have like our older, more mature home, and then we have 2 homes that are for your typical young adult males. Well, yep. So I'm glad that I went last, because I really am kind of just shooting from the hip here, because I just have so much knowledge about all this stuff. I'm glad that I kind of listened to them. So I'm going to try to give you some advice on like just plans of action. So Irene mentioned the drug testing. If you are drug testing at home, you have to go into the bathroom with your son or daughter and watch them pee into the cup. So you can, any kid can buy synthetic urine, fake urine, pour it into the cup. So like if you hand them the cup and then they shut the bathroom door, a million things can happen in order for them to pass that test, right? But I do love the drug testing thing, for obviously so many reasons we've already mentioned. So there is that. Just know that they can pass the test unless you watch them pee into the cup. And then, as we kind of talked about, but I just really think it's important to educate your kids about how much things have changed. So there's a guy I went to high school with. We were at a friend's, dad had passed away. This guy now lives in L.A., and his girlfriend, who is an educated person. I mean, she was a writer, I guess, for the L.A. Times, and like was a smart person, and she had a prescription for Xanax. And he's like, dude, she's passed away. He's like, she wasn't like a drug addict. Like, I never really saw her like overly abusing her Xanax. So she had a prescription for her Xanax. Something happened to where she couldn't get an appointment with her doctor, and she needed it. Xanax is a very physically and psychologically addictive drug, and so she needed it to sleep, and she was addicted to it. But so she brought street Xanax, and she took. It looked exactly like the Xanax that she got from the pharmacy. It was pressed perfectly, all the right, imprints. And she took the same dose of that street Xanax that she had been taking of her prescription Xanax and died that night. So you just really educate your kids. I mean, the big one to me is now they're like lacing cocaine with fentanyl. And so it sounds weird to say like, hey, to your son or daughter, it's not just cocaine anymore, because cocaine is bad enough on its own. But yeah, I mean, you got to tell your kid like, hey, you're not just doing a bump of coke. Like, you could be doing a bump of coke that has fentanyl in it, and then you die. And there's like all these college kids across the nation right now who are dying from cocaine laced with fentanyl, because cocaine's obviously supposed to be an upper, right? Everybody knows that. So you think you're just doing a bump of coke at a party, and then you die. So you really just, the more education, the better. I would say that is just telling your kids everything we talked about today. You know what I mean? And then kind of like what to do. So I think if you do have a troubled teen, then one route is to take them to traditional, therapy. A huge problem I've seen parents make is that they'll drop their son or daughter off at the therapist's office and just be like, all right, go talk to him. No, dude. At the very least, well, really, here's the perfect protocol, is before your son or daughter ever meets with that therapist, you need to have a session with the therapist, either alone or with your son, your kid there with you, to where you're telling the therapist everything that's happening at home. And so some people choose, hey, I want my kid to have like a confidential therapy session with their therapist, And so that means that the therapist is not going to tell you any information about what your son or daughter is saying. But still, every week, you need to be sending an email or a text to the therapist before the session so that your kid can't go in there and just be like, everything's fine. Well, I don't care if you're the best therapist in the world. What do you do with, I'm fine, everything's fine? So at least the therapist can pull up, your text or email and say, well, what about this? What about that? And then if the traditional therapy, which honestly, I mean, if your son is like into drugs or abusing alcohol and you're trying to get them help for that, seeing a therapist once a week is probably not going to do much. I think combining that with the random, drug and alcohol testing. So like at our sober homes, we breathalyze the guys every morning, every night, and the key is the morning. So like, you could have your kid blow into a breathalyzer at night, but then obviously after you go to bed, they can go get as drunk as they want, backyard, alley, wherever. And so you could take it to the next level, breathalyze morning and night, and then a lot of drug tests. You can get an 80-hour alcohol test as well. So if the therapy doesn't work, if the drug testing doesn't work, you can try the IOP, Intensive Outpatient Program. Ideally, you have the IOP do the weekly drug testing themselves because you know that they're going to do it correctly. If it gets to that level to where now you're like, okay, we're going to try an IOP/intensive outpatient program, I think at that point you should have a contract with your son or daughter in place that is in black and white that they sign that says if you continue to abuse drugs and or alcohol while at this IOP, then that lets us know you need a higher level of care and you're actually going to go to residential treatment, also known as rehab. So there are tons of residential treatment centers all across the country. There's tons of them right here in DFW. Lots of them are in network with insurance providers, so it's covered by your insurance. Some of them are private pay. But that's the other key too, is so I talk to like tons of people all day, every day for free. So I have the sober living homes, and that, I guess is how I make a living. And then I do interventions, so people will call me and they will hire me to get their loved one. Usually it's a young adult. They'll hire me to get their young adult male into rehab when that person does not want to go. Because parents oftentimes are like, well, he's 18. I'm like, okay, is he financially independent? And the answer is always no. But honestly, I've intervened on people before in their 50s, 60s, to where the intervention team is actually financially dependent on the person we're intervening on. And that's where you use emotional leverage and the power of love. But where I'm going with this is I did bring only like 10 cards with me, but I'm more than happy if any of you guys want my card to talk to you for free. I have people call me randomly. I'd say 99% of the calls we get through the website are not like a fit for our sober living. And so I'm trying to connect people with resources in the community, whether it be an IOP, whether it be like, hey, maybe you try therapy, or hey, here's some different, rehabs that you need to look into. Like, we can't even take your son right now. Like, your son is like in full-blown addiction. We can take him after he gets out of rehab. So there's just a lot of stuff you can do. And there's a lot of people like me that you can reach out to. I would say, like, if you get online and just Google someone that you can call for advice, I would make sure that the interventionist is like, a licensed clinician. Because unfortunately there's no regulation out there when it comes to interventionists. And so, you can just go to like a weekend workshop and say, hey, I'm an interventionist. And so they might not have the best knowledge for you. But I think any interventionist who's a licensed clinician, you can call them, and they'll probably give you, just like I do every day, a lot of free information just in a quick 30-minute call. Sit there and take notes and be like, all right, now I have a plan of action. They could tell you the good IOPs for teenagers. They could tell you the good rehabs for teenagers. They can tell you where to get the best and cheapest drug tests. There's just all types of information that people like me can give you very quickly. And then if there are, any mental health issues with your son, I do think it is important to look at that, because there is a lot of research that shows that untreated mental health issues will make someone more likely to abuse mind-altering substances, especially like untreated bipolar, like their brain is just all out of whack and they're manic and they're down. And so then it's like they want to take something to try to self-regulate or self-medicate, I guess is the right word. And so, I would suggest this, that if you do take your son to a psychiatrist, I would highly suggest make sure, even before you make the appointment, ask the psychiatrist about DNA testing. Because, man, I think one of the saddest things in our country right now is, kids or adults who are taking psychoactive medication that actually doesn't mix with their DNA. And you could talk about that a lot more intelligently than me, but the bottom line is there are a lot of people who are taking psychoactive medication, meaning Prozac, Lexapro, Zoloft, whatever the case may be, and that specific SSRI doesn't actually mix with them. And so especially with a kid, if your son, maybe your son's currently on meds, I would do the DNA testing and make sure that that medication is not one that doesn't mix well with them. And I think that's pretty much it. I mean, 3 more minutes, but spoke pretty fast. But I really think also, you guys, so here's something else you can do. So if your son is 17 or younger in the state of Texas, then yes, you can hire an interventionist like me to come in and do the whole shebang, where it's like put together an intervention team. You guys write love letters, and so it's all about love, 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 because the idea is to get them to agree to go based on all the love and concern in the room. But 17 or younger, they actually don't have a choice. And so a lot of parents, they just hire what's called a transport service, and that's where, 2 guys like me would show up at your house at, like, I don't know the exact protocol, maybe 5:30 a.m., and they would go into your son's room with you, and you would wake them up, and then they would say, hey, you've been talking to you for a while about your drug and alcohol abuse. It's time to go get help. And they don't have a choice to say no, 17 or younger. Well, fun fact. But then there's also what they call sober coaches, or I guess they sometimes call themselves case managers. I know of a lot of good ones in DFW. And so sometimes parents will hire someone like that to, like, take their son to the gym, or take their son to, like, a 12-step meeting, or they'll hire a case manager to do the drug testing so that they don't have to do it, knowing that this sober coach / case manager knows how to do the drug testing properly. And then also the case manager, over time might be letting you know, hey, your son is still using. Here are some, good rehabs, residential treatment centers to look into. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Appreciate you guys being here.
There's one more thing that I need to bring up that I just have to. It's not good news, but I want you to be aware of it. And I'm glad that you brought that up. That a lot of people are on medication. My son was on Vyvanse, and I look at society now as we see it on TV. A pill fixes everything, and if my son is geared towards knowing that Vyvanse is helping him with his ADHD, or another child is on some sort of medication, they think, oh, a pill's going to help fix everything. So you're at school, and I hate to bring this to you. When I asked my son the first time he got caught smoking pot, I said, where'd you get it? He said, school. And I said, what can you get at school? He goes, everything but cigarettes. Because you have to be 18. I mean, most drug dealers don't card that I know anymore. But my point is if you pass out, if my son was to say, hey, you got a Percocet, I'm feeling a little pain. Yeah, you got a Vyvanse and you trade it. That Percocet that he gave my son as a high school student, or anybody, if he gives my son that pill and he dies, guess what happens? He gets a murder charge now in the state of Texas. So you can also worry that your child can actually take a pill and die, but there's always the chance now with Tucker's Law, if you're linked to giving somebody a pill, if I give somebody here on the stage a pill, he's going to put his bracelets on me, I guarantee you, and you're going to get a murder charge. So that's something I just want to reinstate. And it's happening. I'm on the board at Serenity High School here in McKinney. It's a recovery high school. We've got a couple of students from Frisco here, and it's happening in the schools. The drugs are being passed. They're not selling kilos or anything like that, but they are passing pills around. And make your kids aware that even if they're part of that, they can be linked, and he's coming to see you. So I just wanted to add that in there. So thank you.
So if you have a question, if you want to just raise your hand, there's some people from the school district bringing around different pens and cards. But some of the questions that we had gotten in early, and I'm just going to tackle some of the school-related ones real quick. The first question was, how are our students educated about these things regarding these topics in schools? So what Frisco ISD does is we have state-mandated trainings that we're required to do, and a lot of that content is mandated by the state legislation, so we meet all those required commitments. But then on top of that, what we do is we've added in some different presentations throughout the year. In the spring, that is on top of that. So I was very impressed. Last week we had a student presentation with the Attorney General for the eastern half of Texas. And one of the things he asked those students was he put up a slide of which pill is real and which pill is fake. And it was actually the same exact slide that was in our fentanyl prevention training in the spring. And many of our students rose their hand and pointed at that. So I know we don't reach every student. Our goal is to reach every student, but the trainings that we're doing are working. And I think something, I don't know if you caught that Lieutenant Sullivan said, that we have not, and tell me if I'm wrong on this, but I think I heard you say if FISD has not had to use Narcan yet this school year. Right. So that's progress. Okay, so our kids are listening. Does that mean you don't do your job as a parent? Of course not. I have 3 children myself. They're a little bit older, 27 to 22. I was not parent of the year ever, but I can tell you the open communication, what they talked about is critical. What my ex-wife and I did was once a month, each one of us, we would go with one of our 3 boys to just a restaurant alone, one-on-one. And yes, it was awkward at first, okay? My oldest was horrified. He was like, "You're going to take me to Whataburger? Like, my friends go there," okay? My kids are now between 27 and 22. They come up to me and they're like, "Hey, Dad, can we go to breakfast?" Okay? And again, I'm not parent of the year. I made more mistakes probably parenting than anyone here. But I can tell you, as the parent, what do you want your kids to do when they're in crisis? Contact you. That's how you know. When I meet with parents and they're like, "How did I get to this point?" Oftentimes, it's about the communication. Okay? Couple quick warning signs. If your student disengages from the things they're passionate about, please contact your school. Okay? School counselors, this is a puzzle, and you have pieces that the school doesn't have. Okay? But we can look at the grades, we can talk to the teachers, see if the student's starting to disengage. But as we put all these pieces together as a team, we can come up with a plan. There's amazing resources in our community, okay? But nobody can do it alone. We've got to work together. So if you have concerns about your student, contact your school counselor. That's really the first person you should call and say, "Hey, this is what I'm seeing at home. Are you seeing anything at school?" Okay? All right. There was a question about drug dogs that was sent in. Drug dogs, Frisco ISD does have drug dogs come to secondary campuses, and I guess they really shouldn't be called drug dogs because they also look for firearms. It's but just so you know, yes, that is a program that we do have here in Frisco ISD. All right, so strategies, one of the questions was strategies to better communicate with your teenagers. So I'm going to open that up to the panel for whoever, and there's no, whoever wants to.
I love this topic. Thanks for asking. Strategies. First of all, we need to have an open door policy. Nothing's off limits, right? You want to talk about sex? Let's talk about sex. You want to talk about drugs? Let's talk about drugs. I want to know about your friends. Who do you know that's getting high? What do you think about that? We just ask questions, but non-judgmentally, right? And a lot of open-ended questions. So an example of that would be, hey, what's going on with Janie, or what's going on with your friends? I noticed that you're not hanging out with them as much. Well, we're just not getting along. Okay, well, tell me more. What's going on, right? I don't want to give the answers. I want to ask for the answers. And I want to be careful not to cut them off. Don't finish their sentences. If they use a word you don't understand, be humble enough to ask them to explain it, right? I work with, like I said, teens, and it's been for decades. And, the language changes so quickly every year, right? Al and ISD, they like to bring me out and do talk about the culture of adolescence and how it relates to addiction. And I have a slide. It's an entire slide with all the language, right? Like just slang. And it literally changes from semester to semester, year to year. So when somebody says something that I haven't heard before, I get excited. I'm like, tell me what that means. I've never heard that before, right? They love to teach you just as much as you want to teach them. You can ask simple questions. Tell me something awesome that happened today. Tell me something that was not that great, right? And let's not judge their words. Sometimes they're not going to have the best language if they're emotional. Can we look past those words long enough to hear what they're saying? I'm hurting. I'm aching. I'm mad, and I don't know how to manage this. And what do you need? Ask, what do you need? What can I do? Right? We don't have to have all the solutions. You don't have to fix it. Feelings are not going to kill them. But to be able to talk about it. Let's talk about it. And sometimes when we're arguing, I will tell you, there's so much of my time in family sessions that I spend interpreting, helping both sides understand what the other one is saying, right? Understand that maybe sometimes I'm going to use a word that you use differently. So if we're not seeing eye to eye, say, tell me what's your understanding of that word. What do you mean? Right? Let the conversation keep going. And again, it needs to not be when it's, I'm mad because you're still not listening, you're still not doing it, I told you what to do. Start from the beginning. It's okay. We don't have to be angry. It doesn't have to be a punishment. And if you do call it a punishment, don't be surprised when it's like dragging that mule into the counseling office, right? So go together. I love that when you're like, go together, right? When somebody comes in for an assessment and they want to talk to a counselor, I don't care what they're calling for. They're bringing a family member, adult, teen, bring a family member, because I don't know that you're necessarily going to be brave enough to tell me everything, and I would like to help you. I don't want to just have you come in and tell me, oh, it's great, you feel better now. I want to help. So do the family sessions if you're having a hard time. It doesn't mean that you're messed up, that you're a bad parent, that they're a bad kid. It's just looking for help. That's it.
I can add one comment that I keep thinking about with my son Preston is this all happened after the COVID. Everybody was locked down, and I know mental illness and everything just skyrocketed, I'm sure, during the lockdowns, people not being around their friends and everything. And Preston would kind of be lonely. He'd hang out upstairs and just, kind of be in a veggie mood, or he wasn't using anything, but he was just depressed and wasn't happy. But then there are the times, as a parent, you always want your kids to be happy. And then Preston would come downstairs and he'd be all happy, and I'd be like, all right, he's in a good mood. What did I not do? Ask why he's in a good mood and wonder, hey, is he in a good mood just because he watched something, or is he in a good mood because maybe he took something? So, that's just something that, and I run into that with all parents that have lost their kids. They all have that same thought. When your kids are depressed, we just want them to be happy. And when they're happy, it's like, everything's great. We sure don't want these teenagers, yelling at us or anything. So when they're happy, we're going to be happy. So that's a sign. And it's just, that's something I would just talk to your kids about. And we already talked about the cell phones. I mean, they're still on your payroll. You can look at them. And, and some people, and I told parents they'll get in the phones and they have passwords and they'll change it. And I said, tell them to change it every day, because I guarantee you that kid's going to be mad at you for a couple of days. But I've showed him a picture of my son in a coffin. I hate to get that way, but I said, you can have him mad at you, or that's the next thing you're going to see. Have him mad at you for a couple of days, but I hate to get that way, but I don't want any of you guys to ever be sitting in my seat. So, anyways, thank you.
Hello. I'm not a parent. My dad immigrated to this country from Syria in 1983, and for him, anything about mental health, can't even talk to him about it. Right? It's like he's like, oh, that doesn't happen to us. You know what I mean? And I remember the first time I went and told my dad I struggled with anxiety, and he was all in, like immediately switched on. So he made it comfortable enough for me because he took interest in what I do. He was the assistant coach for my soccer team. He was there for my post-school stuff when I had a soccer practice. So taking an interest really helped me feel more comfortable to talk with him. And because we grew up in a different society. He grew up in the Middle East. I was born and raised here. And so it's making sure you're bridging that gap. Also, that really helped me. And even to this day, whenever I'm struggling with anything, I'll still call my dad. He'll still tell me to man up, but still, it's fine.
All right. Someone's question was, will this session be shared as a recording? And the answer to that is yes. You'll be able to find it on the Frisco ISD website in about 48 hours. Next question. Drug use is in our schools. What's the best way to report without it coming back on our child? Frisco ISD uses the Stop It app. So that's it's anonymous. So that's what I would recommend. You can find it on the Frisco ISD website. You can access it there, or your child has access to it on some of their one-on-one devices. So, but if you have questions, if you're not able to access Stop It at home, contact your child's school, and they'll walk you through the exact steps and the best way to do that. So, do you have anything to add to that, Lieutenant?
No, Stop It. So when they put that in, it'll go to the SROs on the campus, and it'll also go to the administrators on the campus. I will say it is anonymous, but we would generally have to have like actionable intel. So if they say, Joe Smith was just in the bathroom smoking a vape, then the administrators could go get Joe Smith out of class and search his stuff and see if he does have a vape on him. If they just say there was a group of kids between passing periods smoking in the bathroom, we can go check the bathroom, but by that time no one's there, and there's really nothing that we can do further. Even if we look at the security camera to see who was in the bathroom at the time, most of the time the bathrooms get crowded with 15 kids. There's only 3 stalls, but 15 kids are in there. We can't go pull we just can't go pull all those kids, because some are genuinely using the restroom and some aren't. I mean, and it's pretty obvious at that point. But actionable information really helps the administrators to address the issues. And honestly, that was one of my biggest pet peeves when I was in the school, was the fact that I would see, kids on camera go up to a bathroom and immediately turn around and walk away because there's 12 kids in there and they don't want to be a part of what's going on in the bathroom. So we tried to show a big presence in the bathrooms to try and keep that from happening, but there's usually only, 1 to 2 SROs on campus, and there's, 7, 8 bathrooms. So it's just once we show a presence at one, they move their activities to different ones.
All right. Does anyone have any statistics on gender differences among kids using these drugs? And John, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of your houses are all male, correct? Okay. So you had referenced son or male a couple of times, and that's probably just because that's the population you deal with.
I don't have the statistics, but I can tell you after assessment, and the kids that we see. If I have 10 kids in my IOP, I will have 1 to 2 girls. We also teach a DWI class, and I'm always surprised if there's more than 2 females that are in the DWI class. It is far more likely that we see far more males than females that end up at the point of their life becoming unmanageable. So,
just in enforcement wise, it's pretty even. Just on my end, just enforcement wise, whether it's working in a college town and coming across the individuals who are choosing to drink and drive. I mean, it was very very kind of evenly distributed. And then just in my personal experience in the schools, just thinking of the faces of the kids that we've had to use Narcan on and had to call ambulances on, it's pretty even in that regard from what I saw in the schools. Now I will say maybe the overall usage would lean more towards your male students, but the individuals who are, kind of our one-time users, our initial users, and showing reaction and having issues to where EMS comes. Honestly, I saw more females than I did males when it comes to who had to have, EMS response to the schools.
I just want to say this real quick, because I didn't mention this earlier. Search your kids' rooms. So, like, I've had $1 for every parent I spoke to who's, like, wondering if their son is abusing drugs. And I'm like, well, have you searched his room? And there's like, no. So, I would say once a week you search your kid's room. And,
with gloves.
And then you use Google. Like, if you do find a pill, then you Google, you can Google what the numbers say, and it'll tell you what kind of pill it is. Of course, as we talked about, a lot of it's all fentanyl, but there's that. But also, like, if you find a vape, then you can Google the label of the vape, and it's going to tell you, is this Delta 8? Is this a THC vape? Is this a nicotine vape? But search their rooms and Google it. And then just lastly, sorry to interrupt the whole thing, but in my opinion, like, I have a 2.5-year-old and a 10-month-old. I will never let a doctor prescribe my kid an opiate. I'm talking about unless it, and I don't want to speak negative, but there's really no reason. There's a lot of medication someone can take to treat pain, and if I had $1 for every intervention I've done on a college-aged kid who got addicted to opiates back whenever they were prescribed pain pills for legitimate pain. But there is no reason to get prescribed hydrocodone anymore, in my opinion. I thought they were getting more, stingy with it, so to speak, but I didn't know it was still like that. Yeah, no opiates, even if prescribed. No way. Anyways.
Next question. How do we prevent buying via text or Instagram? So I'll start with this one and then let you all. Like I mentioned, I had 3 kids. They were my phones. They were on Verizon. I could see what they were doing from my computer. Okay, Verizon has a lot of parental, and I'm not speaking for Verizon, but like there's stuff out there if you try to go get it, okay? And one of the most powerful things I heard tonight was giving your kids the permission to say to their friends, no, I can't do that because either my parents are going to drug test me or my parents are going to find out. Okay? My kids always had, I knew where they were. And again, I wasn't parent of the year. I knew where they were. And if they texted me like 911, that meant I got in the car and they were like, my dad just called and I got to go home. And that was it. Blame it on me. I'll take the heat for the peer pressure. Peer pressure is real. I get it. I'm 56. I was talking to somebody earlier today. Like, I'm ready to go back to where the phone is connected to the wall in the kitchen because my parents heard every conversation I had, and that was like with my girlfriend and everything. Like, I don't know. Maybe that's what we need to go back to. But, the technology is out there for you to know what your kids are doing. And I always told my kids, you know, put the heat on me, make me the bad guy.
My favorite thing to read on my kid's phone was, is your mom still reading your text messages? And he's like, yep. And then they would be like, well, hey, and they would be like, hey, Mom, and they, you know, and they'd mess with me. And I'm like, I love this. This is my favorite. Good, right? They should know. Don't mess with my kid because he is far more important than you to me, right? I don't care if you think he's not cool or I'm not cool. The other thing is that you should have their password to get into their phone. And for me, reading my kid's phone, it is not just a quick look. It is hours. It is a job because that's what we signed up for. And I'm going into each app. And he'd be like, you can't do my Snapchat because then I don't care about your streak. And I don't care if they think that you're not responding and whatever. They know your mom's going through your phone. Who cares? Open the apps. Instagram, when they were trying to get around the texting, I'd go into the Instagram and I'd read about it, right? Because they have that private message there. Any app, I want to know, is it one of the fake ones? Is it a hidden one? Are they all, right? Open them. Just look. If it's nothing, good. You didn't do anything but waste a little bit of time. But it's the regret of not looking and not knowing that's going to make a big difference. So also, Xbox, PlayStation, those have been used for drug deals. They can communicate. So know that people are leaving stuff on the side of the house. Check your side. If you have somebody who is struggling, check the side of your house. Do you have packages there? Do you have bag? Is there something, right? Because kids will drop it off. It's like full service these days. So.
Yeah, I would just add on searching the bedrooms. A lot of times when you either restrict your child from their phone or you are very adamant about searching their phone, they'll get a spare, like an old phone from a friend, and as long as they can charge it up and get onto the Wi-Fi, now they have access to all the apps to be texting through the different apps. So especially if your kid initially didn't, had a big problem with you checking their phone, now all of a sudden they're okay with it, they probably got another device somewhere.
Macs are really good for that because a lot of times they're just brilliant enough to connect it to, like, even their burner phone is connected to the Mac, and so you take the computer, right? Remember to take the computer because they can text through that, and all of a sudden it's blowing up at night. You know that they've got an extra phone.
All right, a couple more questions. One question was mental health rehabs are full. What do we do while we're waiting? I'll begin with that. If you're experiencing that, talk to your school counselors. We have a couple of people for Frisco ISD who work closely with the hospitals and the rehabs in the area, and they talk to many of the local ones almost on a daily basis. So they are very knowledgeable of who has openings and things like that. So if you're running into that problem, I would encourage you to contact your school counselor and ask to talk to they're called hospital liaisons. They'll know who you're talking about. But
well, I can tell you we're not full.
So
we're not full. Again, a lot of doing treatment with us, though, it's a full family affair. So some people it's a bit too much. But we aren't full. There's other places that are still accepting patients, and sometimes you can start at the outpatient level first. In fact, sometimes the insurance won't accept them until you've failed at a lower level of care. So, but the good thing is to get involved. So for us, if we're working with a family and your kid needs to go to a higher level of care, then while your kid is in that higher level of care that we will help you get them to, we want to continue to work with you and the rest of the family so that you are prepared with what are the ground rules, what are the boundaries, how do we reset this for when your person comes home, because 30 days sounds like a long time, and in teen years it is, but in parent years it is a minute, and it will go by very quickly, and you need to be prepared when they come home.
All right, next question. How do we know or identify someone's a certified clinician / therapist?
Okay. They should be licensed. You should be able to look them up on the state website. So if they're licensed as a chemical dependency counselor, then you will find them under the DSHS, it's Department of State Health Services. There's license verification. You can put their name in there and verify it. If it is a licensed marriage and family therapist or a licensed professional counselor or a social worker, you can look them up on the Texas Behavioral Health Executive Committee website. They're all Texas licensing boards, but for whatever reason they decided to switch and branch out. I personally have to report to 4 different boards because I'm also a licensed speech language pathologist. But every licensed individual, you can find their license online.
All right, and our last question, it's a kind of a 2-part question. First part's, how many kids do we think use drugs in FISD high schools by percentage? And then how bad is the drug epidemic in Texas universities? So I'll tackle the first part. There's one resource I would encourage you to go to. It's called Monitoring the Future. It's done by University of Michigan every year. And they survey, I think it's close to 25,000 high school students. It's kind of the top of this data. And what their numbers say is it's about 10 to 11% are using alcohol. I think it's maybe it's a little bit higher for alcohol, but you can see those statistics. What we tell our students is it's a myth that everybody's doing it, okay? If 10% are doing it, that means 90% are not doing it in the last 30 days, okay? So the fact, when I hear that, are there kids doing it? Yes. Is everybody doing it? No. And you can look at Monitoring the Future, and I encourage you to talk to your kids about that. The Frisco ISD, we do something called the Safe School Surveys. Our numbers are consistently lower. I don't know them off the top of my head, but I can tell you the last 3 to 4 years, we have always been lower than the national averages. So if you go to Monitoring the Future and you see those numbers, we're always lower than that. So I think it does say that our drug programs do work, but is there drug use and alcohol use by adolescents in our community? Yes. I'm not going to sit here and bury my head in the sand. Yes. And I think
I'd like to say too, I've been around for way too long. Actually, no, because I love it. But Frisco ISD is the only school that really, really puts action behind what they say when they talk about we want to help improve our outcomes. They don't pretend like it's not happening. They're doing everything they can to get families out here. I've been to some schools where they're like, well, let's not talk about that, or, you know, let's not do that, or no, it's not so bad here. The reality is it's here. But Frisco does work really hard to right that ship. And it is true, it's not everybody's doing it. Sometimes, though, we got to remember that a kid's world is very, very, very small. And so all they see is what they see. And so if all their friends and everyone they know is doing it, that's because that's who they're maybe spending time with or who they're around. And high school, it's like once they get out of high school, it's like the whole world opens up. And so we have to remember, we have to protect them and help them see some different perspectives. They can't see the forest for the trees, right? So.
And then, Lieutenant Sullivan, do you want to talk about the university thing? I know it's probably been a while since you've been there. I will say one thing. I had a conversation in March. I went over to Sheriff Skinner's office in March and spoke to him for about 30 minutes. And he brought up the universities. And what he said is, you know, are there parties on universities? Yes. The other part, sort of an acute thing with university students that they're seeing, is kids are trying to stay up all night or take a ADHD medication that is not theirs before they go into an exam because they think it's going to help them focus better, and it's laced with fentanyl, and they end up dead. And all the child was trying to do was get a better grade on an exam. It wasn't any sort of party issue. But that's where these drug dealers, because they're making a ton of money on the universities, and in terms of what he told me in March was the two biggest cartels in Mexico made $80 billion the year before on fentanyl.
Mm-hmm.
That's I looked up how many, I think that's like top 75 Fortune 500 company revenue.
Mm-hmm.
So.
I want to add too, if it's okay, and this is what I love about what John does, is he's providing an alternative environment so that not only is there structure and yes, there's rules and this is what it takes to live here, to be sober, but it's also an opportunity to be with people who you don't have to say no to all the time. You don't have to resist all the time. It's that community and the alternative peer group. And there is a huge wave now in the colleges, at the universities, with sober dorms, so that the people who chose to be in recovery and or just want to be sober, they have places to go and people to join with, and they do sober tailgating and sober. They have a lot of really great sober activities, and so there is more of a push. So it's just about knowing what our resources are and pointing in that direction.
All right. Does anyone have any last things they want to say?
I will say one thing with when you ask about how many students and everything. I hate to be always the guy with the bad news, but from 18 to 45, it's the leading cause of death now. Just to kind of let you know. And I try and get out there and be preventative, because for me to go talk to people in addiction, they're already past that point for me to talk to them, because they already know what they're going to get into. You know, they're taking the pills. I've seen people out on the streets, and I've been walking with homeless people out on the streets, and I've seen dead bodies, and these people know what they're getting into. So I'm trying to catch them at this age, the high school and younger age, to be preventative before you become that 18 to 45. So that's the number that I have to watch, and I hate that, but it is the number. So
You just remind, like, one of the beautiful things about this, and I think is super important, and I think about this, again, I know it sounds really strange that I'm a speech therapist and a marriage and family therapist and addiction specialist, but we're talking about early intervention. And, you know, if you look at, if we can take the shame away and we can talk about the whole family being a part of the solution and that we need to learn different ways to interact, I will tell you, one of my favorite things is I love working with people who are on the spectrum as well. And one of the biggest things that we've learned is when you look at the research and where the most effective treatment is for somebody who's on the spectrum, it's when the whole family is involved, early intervention, 20 hours of intervention, typically in the very beginning. You can see huge progress with just all of the hallmarks of autism spectrum disorder. The same thing is, if you can take away the shame, you can do early intervention and intensive intervention on the beginning, you're going to see long-term great recovery. So again, that's why we're here. That's what we do. There is so much comparison. If we can help people to not feel so isolated, it is not shameful. This is not, people aren't going down to the bridge downtown and like having to do the things that they used to do back in the day to get drugs. It's in every format. It is sold in these shops as natural herbs. They are not, right? They've got a synthetic, they've got an illicit, they've got a prescription for every type of drug. Most of the people we work with are professionals. So it's going to impact, it does not discriminate. So that's my last thing. So I apologize. Thanks for letting me share.
thank you all for being here. We appreciate it. Like we said, it is recorded. And thank you to our panel. You all have a great night.